But I'm going to leave the public comment period open for the entire meeting. And the reason for that is because we have a small group here, and because some of you know quite a lot about housing. And I'd like to, and we'd probably all like to hear what you have to say. But what I can't do, I've been told, according to regulation, is I can't have a discussion with you. That is, if you say, I like X, and I say, well, do you like X and Y? I can't do that. So we will just listen to what you have to say, and then if we want to discuss it up here, you know. So anyway, that's the way it is. It isn't the way my life has been, but it's the way it is now. And I appreciate everybody's understanding that, because I didn't, it isn't the way I would do it if I had my own way. So public comment period. Does anyone want to start out with a public comment?
Let me do roll call first.
Oh, sorry.
That's quite all right. Members of the committee, Councilor Paula Schnapp.
Here.
Councilor Betty Lutke.
Here.
Councilor Charlie Bloom.
Here.
Councilor John Crow.
Here.
Councilor Gordon Starr.
Here.
Mary Ann Barboza. Hilda Hay.
Here.
Rick Presby.
Here.
Laura Schufelt.
Here.
You have quorum.
So we need to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Do we have, we don't have the minutes. We don't approve the minutes because it's videotaped or recorded. Jim Kupfer.
It's a public comment now.
Public comment, that's right. Thank you. You don't have an extra pen, do you?
Okay, the green light is on. Everyone hears me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing the public comment and listening to me for half a second here. I've listened to all your meetings online.
If you could just state your name for us.
My name is Larry Nicholas. Sorry about that. I don't know most of you. I think I know Rick and Laura. But thank you for your service and trying to put something forward with some housing that makes sense. I'm sure you're all aware of I know Jim Kupfer is aware of it, I'm sure, the recent housing bylaw that's been passed that may or may not help us. The first section of it was, the ADUs, but we already have an ADU. I think none of us are really happy with the amount of ADUs which have been constructed. And that may be something you want to look at to tweak a little bit, but it's expensive, not easy to do. And I think that's probably why the numbers are as low as they are. And I'm not sure. I don't have a recommendation on how to fix that, but it is a good ordinance. I'm glad we have it. The other section of the bylaw, which probably could help us, I kind of quickly looked at the lots that are available out there. There's probably 50, 60 of them that are fairly readily available, and that's what they're calling the adjacent lots. And that is on page 77 of that 181 pages on this bill. And basically it says a lot of lots got gobbled up in 85 when we went to acre. People bought lots, smaller lots next to their houses that maybe they were going to leave for their children or wanted the privacy. And those lots got combined. Most of them are small lots in the Hyannis area, but they're on sewer. And I think they would be considered buildable when you read the bylaw, which was approved. There's always the rest of the story when you read those. What happens if you bought a house and one of those lots got combined with your house and you put a mortgage on it, it's going to be difficult for them to get partial releases. But I think it can be done. It would help if the interest rates do come down, and then they would have to refinance to be able to build on that one lot. But there's approximately, in the town of Barnstable, somewhere right around 40 or 50 of those that free up. And people necessarily won't want to sell them or do that or have a house next to them, but they are available. And it's something to think about and research and kind of make it workable within the town through the departments, so when they do come in. And then the second half of that, those are the small lots, but if you have one of those lots, you have to build a 3-bedroom house, and it can't exceed 1,850 square feet, which is kind of nice because, you know, if we do make lots available, we don't necessarily want multi-million-dollar houses being built on these lots. We want them to be hopefully purchased by working people or young people who are kind of boxed out of the market because of the price points. In that one last section of, let me just read it, and this is, I think, probably the most important section of it. Any single, basically, it's got to have the zone, have to be in the right zoning district, allow single-family residence. Any single resident structure constructed on a lot shall not exceed 1,850 square feet of heated living area, shall contain no less than 3 bedrooms, and shall not be used as seasonal home and short-term rental. And it's kind of what, I think that's what we're looking for. And so I kind of like those last 3. So I think, how can we spin that off into helping us create more lots that don't necessarily, we're selling, the lots are selling right now at crazy numbers. I mean, I've recently just sold a lot, 2-acre lot. They're over 400,000, and all the houses we're building are $1.7 million, $1.5 million. And the average, as we know, with a recent study that was done, the average price of the house in the town of Barnstable, and I think it's 2 years ago, 2 years' numbers were over $800,000. So how do we get that number down so people can buy houses and live in them, and especially 3-bedroom houses where families can live? So one way to do it, and I recently went through a process of an A&R process with Jim Kupfer's department, the planning department, and they do a very good job. They're very pleasant, and they got it done in a timely fashion. I was very happy with them. I'm glad we have them working for us. But all the lots now in this particular area in West Barnstable, where I do live, are 2-acre zoned. And if you look at the maps, on the critical areas on the maps, which are created by the town, the well protection areas, and the zone 2s, I mean, those areas, I think we should probably have as large as zoning as possible. And I agree with the 2-acre zoning in those areas. But my particular lots and my neighbor's lots around him, there's probably about 10 lots that could be developed there on 2-acre lots, and using the same verbiage that's being used on what was just approved by the State House. If someone has 2 acres and it's not in a critical zone, a well protection zone or a zone 2, so that the Board of Health, when we developed those, that overlay district, which created the 2 acres, the overlay district, it's still an RF zone. It's still a 1-acre zone. They did not change the sideline requirements, the frontage requirements, but most importantly, they did not change the number of bedrooms that you could get. So you still can get 6 or 7 bedrooms on those 2-acre lots because they're out of those zones. So if we allow those 2-acre lots to be divided into 2 1-acre lots, I don't know if anyone's walked a 2-acre lot recently, but they're huge. And 1-acre lots are huge. So we have lots that have been created. We have lots that are going to be created in those zones that are going to be drawn up as 2 acres. And when we sell those 2 acres, it's $400,000 or $500,000. And so we're talking about more $100 million, $5 million, $7,000 houses. But if we use the verbiage that's been created, limiting the size of the houses to 1,850 and to be a minimum of 3 bedrooms, I think it would open up some lots. So I think it's something to think about. I wanted to throw that out to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Phelan. I'm from Centerville, and I did row here today. I wanted to thank everybody for serving on this board. Mrs. Schufelt, I would work with Eric for 3 years at the Harbor Master's office, and he was wonderful. So please say hi to him for me. My purpose for getting on, I put an application in for this committee and did make the cut. And I really appreciate everybody that's served, and especially Cindy. She's got a lot of work. She jumped ahead of her, and she's been doing a great job of maintaining all this. The purpose, I think housing could be, there's a puzzle, a piece of the puzzle for housing that I wish we would look at as a town. The first thing is, I don't understand why it's taken 10 years to convert the elementary school in Marston's Mills into housing. I think we need to do better at that. We need to look at any town building that's put in what's the term? I'm not sure. That's not used anymore. We should have put forth something that could speed up the process. I also think we made a mistake converting the school in Katuitt. We gave that to the Katuitt Water Department. I would have loved to seen that turned into housing instead. I know, I'm in precinct 6. I know of at least 5 seniors that are house poor. They'd love to get out of their house, but they don't have a place to go. And they can't maintain it either, so the houses do need work. I spoke to Jim, and he was very open to it, and he's a great listener. I wondered if we could have some type of program. If we build senior housing, if it ever comes to that, we could fill it with seniors in town and then backfill those houses however we'd like. The key word is backfilling. We could use affordable housing, families, workforce, and it's interesting when you get into the weeds about the difference in all 3 of those. I'm not going to take anyone's time up, even try to get into the particulars on those. But those are my 2 thoughts up top. To look into reasons we can't do more with any building that's abandoned in town. And speaking of abandonment, there's an abandoned house next to me. It's been vacant for 15 years. And I know that there's other ones around. And you people, maybe not on every street in town, but there's quite a few abandoned homes. For the life of me, I can't understand why the gentleman is just sitting on it. And he refused to sell it and refused to rent it. I know of other cities that are putting an extra tax on a vacant house. I know people hate the tax word, but I think our focus is trying to fill homes. There's one thing that I'd like to bring up, incidentally. I meant to bring up in the beginning. I don't know why there was so much problem getting here. There was a lot of animosity on the board. There were people standing before town council leadership throwing stones at them when they're trying to fix a problem. I don't understand that at all, because every one of you are here listening to us, the public, and then speaking among yourselves, brainstorming. What was the problem? I'd love to know what started that. And again, my thanks to this current leadership for at least forming these committees and discussing it, trying to come up with an answer to some of our problems. The last thing, I'll close with this, and most of you know, this is something that I've been trying to bring forth to the town for a while. Airports are land hogs. When I started going to meetings when I was retired, I had more time on my hands. I was going to meetings at Twin Brooks and up at the airport at the same time. The airport was deserted. It's like a ghost town up there. I call it the Cape Cod Ghost Airport, in fact. And unfortunately, it didn't work out at Twin Brooks, but there is a better use, or there is a good use, not a better, I take that back. There is it is being used for educational purposes. So there's 650 acres up at the airport sitting there, and they're only doing 7% of the business they once did. And they're also dumping tons and tons of CNO on our heads. And I don't understand why it's being ignored. They want to spend $25 million extending the runways there, and they keep telling us it's free money. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tax money. Don't bite and listen and accept that it's free money to the town. They're going to put in they're going to extend the runways. And incidentally, this isn't mandated by the FAA. This is something they just want to do to help anybody with a private luxury jet. So, and we'll be indebted to the FAA for another 30 years, tie up that property for another 30 years. I'd rather see senior housing go up there, businesses, recreation, 650 acres. And I'm not saying we have to close the airport. We have an opportunity. The big word here is opportunity, folks. We could merge with Joint Base Cape Cod. This town won't take the first step to walk up there and at least have a discussion. It costs nothing at all, ladies and gentlemen, to have a discussion. And then you can tell me to go fry, you know what, fry ice maybe? But thank you all very, very much. Like I started out saying, I very much appreciate this opportunity. And I have been able to listen to the previous meetings. Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? Eric Schwab, Hyannis. So I've been chatting with Mary Ann. She sends her regrets. She's got the grandkids today, but she put me up to this. She wants something done now. She appreciates all your hard work and all your thinking, but she challenged me to come up with ideas that could be implemented now. And I challenge you similarly. I think that you have to come out of this in the next month or so with concrete suggestions that you can start now. So here are my suggestions for what they're worth, and I know that some of them are not in line with, current thinking, but I think you could do something now. I attended the Affordable Housing Trust. Mr. Starr was there on Friday. Julian Sear was presenting. There's $2 million of unallocated funds in that fund. There's $500,000 getting ready to go out the door in Hyannis here up on Barnstable Road. There's $2 million, the reserve for 307 Main that's never going to produce a house in our lifetimes. Okay, but there are $2 million unencumbered right now, and you could do any number of things with that money. I really do think you need to put in place a deed restriction program. If you're talking about moving seniors out of their homes, one way of doing that is to offer them a deed restriction, put a little extra money in their pocket. You're basically partially buying the home, giving them an opportunity to look around, maybe have a little more mobility than they've had in the past, and then potentially if they move on to senior housing or whatever you're going to build for them, that home would be deed restricted. And a deed restriction program with a little bit of paperwork you could have in place by the first of the year. And all you'd have to do is take a vote today if you wanted to, asking the town council to consider implementing a deed restriction program and requesting that Mr. Kupfer's office get that together, because they have the expertise to do it. They know how to do these programs. And they just really need the go-ahead from you to start now. The other thing, along the lines of the 2-acre zoning, there are some very nice older properties up just north of here between the airport over towards on Betty's Pond. They're not 2 acres, they're half-acre properties. They're clearly older properties. They're very majestic. And they're a half acre. I mean, I've got 10,000 square feet. I'm in West Hyannis. But you could, along the lines of the zoning change, allow townhomes to be developed on half-acre lots. The biggest challenge for builders here in Hyannis is that the lots are pretty small, and they have to assemble lots in order to build anything bigger, right? That's why we lost the church. It's a good-sized lot. They can put 4 huge buildings there, so that's attractive to builders today. And we're incenting builders to build these big apartment houses because we're giving them money from the Affordable Housing Trust, okay? We could just as easily give money from the Affordable Housing Trust to developers or property owners who have half-acre lots that want to redevelop their family homestead, either as a duplex or with an ADU. You can't really build an ADU. I tried to build an ADU in my backyard. The numbers don't work. They're at $350 a square foot. Even with just one parking space, the smaller houses you can't put an ADU in anywhere, not with a quarter acre. But if you have a half acre, you could incent those property owners here in Hyannis to either build an ADU or a duplex, and it would be a very minor zoning change. And most people who object to the 3- and 4-story apartment buildings aren't going to object to 2 townhomes or 3 townhomes in a row with decent parking. So again, you could, if you wanted to, recommend to the town council that they look at zoning changes, incremental zoning changes along the lines that were recommended previously, and to free up lots, but more than single-family homes, 1,800 square foot single-family homes, you should consider allowing duplexes. And I'll leave it up to the planning to decide what's appropriate, where it's appropriate to put a duplex. But certainly the area in Hyannis and around, the shopping, the Shaws up by me, that whole area could support duplexes easily. And it wouldn't offend anyone, and it'd be decent, livable places, and even you'd have a backyard. So thank you for considering those ideas. And again, I seriously hope that this committee, which is obviously gathering some steam, comes up with concrete solutions, recommendations to the town council this year, so that we can all start the new year with a bright expectation for more housing for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, for now, that's all the public comment. Jim?
If I could just interrupt for 1 second. I'm sorry. IT wanted you to read in the beginning of the agenda, the statement for the recording. So we don't get, do you have that on the agenda? Or do you want me to read it?
The meeting is being recorded and will be rebroadcast on the Town of Barnstable Government's Access Channel. In accordance with the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. This meeting will be replayed via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be a success via Government Access Channel live video on demand archives on the Town of Barnstable website, which is, get your pen and paper, https://streaming85 Town of Barnstable US/cablecast public site ? Channel =1. Everybody get that? Thank you.
Do you have a response to public comment at all?
What?
Before we- do you
Chair?
want- Or go right to Jen?
Yes, okay, responses to public comment? Paula?
Thank you. Were you going to do responses to public comment?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone who came here tonight, this afternoon, with their suggestions, very concrete suggestions. And I think that all of them are worthy of our review and analysis. Some strategies, I think, are going to need a lot of detail work, and possibly the role of this committee is to recommend larger strategies that then can kind of be teased out by our staff and then maybe some other community input. But I would really urge all of you who did speak today to be available when we start having some of the harder conversations around some of these issues. When we're talking about repurposing some of our public properties, the schools, generally there's a reason why they haven't become housing. And oftentimes, those in the room decide that if there's a wellhead protection zone within a mile of a housing site, potential housing site, then that's a reason not to let housing be built there. And as often occurs, those who are closest to a property might be the ones most concerned about its future use and are most likely to be the people who show up at every single meeting. So it tends to bias the view that the community may be opposed to housing instead of supporting it. So as we move forward with the one school property that we currently have available for housing, please consider showing up when there are opportunities to, provide your support for that. And also, I think some of the zoning changes, are very much in line with what other communities across the nation have been exploring, trying to expand density, but in a way that's not overly harmful to the community's perspective of what's a good neighborhood and what might tax the infrastructure. But again, sometimes those things have opposition, and so we need people to continue to support those ideas if they come forward. I think that one of the strategies I'm hoping comes out of this committee is to look at the opportunities where our zoning can be changed to allow this type of activity to occur. But then the big question is where? And how is that going to happen? Because it's maybe not appropriate in all parts of our town to have that denser housing. So I just wanted to thank those who came and welcome your continued participation and support as we move through this process.
Anyone else? Comments from the committee? Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think these were all really good comments. I like that we're getting very precise comments. And I'll also add, we did have a written comment from Jake Dewey that was very detailed. And I think a lot of the comments have in common that we're getting down to actionable items, things that we can do without these grandiose plans and 300-unit developments. That why can't we work on a smaller level and do a lot with what we have? So I really I like those comments. And Paul, you talked about municipal property. I went to a fantastic presentation of a Sandwich. They had a wing school, an old school, and they did a lot of public participation. People came, they decided what they wanted, and I know we've had a lot of challenges here. They kept the oldest part of the school. The newer parts they tore down because the public said, do not tear down that oldest part. We need to keep that because it has such a presence in Sandwich. And then the Sandwich folks went out of their way to put together a request for proposals, and they did what you've mentioned, Paul, and I think, Eric, you mentioned as well, senior housing. And the phone is ringing off the hook from seniors who want to live there, and they also did the details where they're going to be able to have local seniors there. So it can be done. They did a great presentation, so the model is right there of what to do. But again, the duplex idea, to me, a duplex and a ADU is somewhat the same thing. It's putting two properties on the same property, if you will, or two dwellings. So lots of good ideas. Deed restrictions, I think we should have done that 3 years ago. We've just got to find the funding source. CPA funds may be one of those sources to do that. But we have to look at the finances and make sure the finances work for that. But money always helps. And, Paul, you mentioned that with, seniors that are house poor and can't keep up with things. So lots of great ideas, and I'll agree with Paula. Let's stay on them going forward. But I would love to come out of here with some actionable items that are worked immediately. And again, less reliance on a housing production plan, which may just sit on a shelf and really, and I've said it before, serves the purpose of protecting us from 40Bs, which I don't want to be protected from. And, speaking of that, one of the things that Jake Dewey said in his comments, which the public can't hear because he sent them to us, was he talked about a gradation of affordability. I think with the 40Bs, it's 25%. And he talked about a gradation of the affordability percentage based on number of units, which I think makes a lot of sense. So these are common sense things that I want to focus on. Thank you.
Other comments from the committee?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the public comments and for all those who continue to show up at our meetings and try to participate. And your input are so important to us and to this committee. I'm not sure if this is something, but this is my suggestion. Like, since we are so short on housing, I think that the housing that we are really going to be building immediately now, because we need these like from 10 years ago, but since we are so slow in doing it, if there is a way that we could like restrict these houses just for people who live here, you have to be living here at least for a year or something, so that the people that are actually living here will be able to get somewhere to live. Is that a possibility? Is that something that we could look into? Thank you.
Thank you. I have one quick comment on something that you said that I just wanted to make it crystal clear. Jake Dewey's comment, basically, among a lot of things that he said, was that for every development that exists, there needs to be a formula for what percentage is affordable. And if you look at what the town has done in the last 10 years, that has not been done. There have been some pretty significant developments that had very low numbers of affordable housing. And if we're trying to catch up to the 40B 10%, we can't build 25 units and make 2 of them affordable, because then we're falling further behind. We can't even make 10% affordable, because you're falling behind. You've got to make a good number. So he defines, Jake Dewey that is, define small projects, bigger projects, exactly what the percentage is. It would be fixed. In other words, it wouldn't be a decision that's made project by project. It would be a fixed number. And I wouldn't have thought 30 years ago that would be necessary, but now I know it is. Anybody else? Rick? Oh, yes.
And what you were just talking about kind of is along the line of what I wanted to talk about. Because at the beginning of this committee, you mentioned that we need to decide on what population we're aiming for. And, as far as market rate housing, the really expensive stuff, I don't think we need that. I want to concentrate on working class people and poor people and see what we can do. And
let me comment on that too. There are categories of people who, when you read the newspapers and you listen to other discussions I've talked about, and they're not all poor as such. But we now are in a situation that is different than we were certainly 30 years ago, where a person that has a decent and good income and a decent and good job can't afford to buy a house. And in our society as a whole, home ownership has been critical to people, the equity people have and the wealth they have for retirement, for college, for other things. And so I want, at some point soon, for the committee to discuss that and make a decision about what our priorities are. Are the priorities people who are very poor and have no housing at all? Are people who can't afford rental housing, at various percentages? Are people with low-paying jobs? And even people with moderate-paying jobs that can't afford sometimes the rent. And some of the projects that have been proposed in Barnstable that I'm aware of have very high rents that even people that are well off can't afford. Using well off as, let's say, lower middle class, whatever that means percentage-wise. And so those are concerns that I think we have. And one of my concerns, just quickly, and I'll probably say this 100 times, is that this has been a problem certainly since 40B was passed in 1969. I mean, the legislature knew the problem. And, yet it has not in a massive way in most towns in Massachusetts been pursued to solve. And so what we decide here has a pretty good chance of resulting in nothing. And I don't really want to come to all these meetings and have these discussions and have it result in nothing. I mean, why would we bother? Especially since it's so critically needed for the health of our society. And so, as we move along here, I want to be clear with this committee what groups are our priorities to help and how the ideas that we're going to submit to the council help those priorities. While I understand that builders and developers and sometimes real estate people, and I've done both, want to have housing that is, well, as Larry Nicholas mentioned, want to build expensive housing. They're wonderful homes. People come here and live in them. They have lots of money to spend in our businesses and so forth. And I don't object to that, but that's not really I don't think it's really what we're here for. We're representing government that's trying to make sure people average people have decent places to live. Yes.
Thank you. Looking at the agenda, number 4 is identify need priorities. And I know we could have this discussion forever, but I think we should get back to Jim.
Yeah.
Still here? Okay.
Are you suggesting when we have that discussion, we should make a decision tonight?
No, but we should have that discussion then,
Okay.
not now.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. I appreciate that.
No, we can't make any, we're not going to make many decisions tonight, but we'll get closer, I hope.
So I asked Jim to come tonight. I live in Marston's Mills, and he's been to several meetings in the Mills to talk about the 14-acre property there. That's really not what I invited him here for, and the reason I mention that is because I've had several emails that, we were going to get the secret plan that the town has, and I've tried to tell people that, one, we're not going to make the decision in this committee, and two, I don't think there are really secret plans, but there, and so you can talk about, I hope you do, what you're doing in the Mills, but what you're doing otherwise as a department that relates to what we need to know. Thank you for coming.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Jim Cufford, Director of Planning. In terms of Marston's Mills, no secret plan, unfortunately. No, there is an active plan being developed, 3 concept plans. We hope to be able to unveil them to the public very soon here and go back out to the public for comments. It's unfortunate that I hear these, rumors being made, but it is appropriate to, develop out those concepts and release them at once so that drafts aren't being thrown around and even more rumors being developed out. So we're hoping that we'll have a great dialogue probably towards the end of this month back out in the public on 3 concepts to review and then back to council for further input there. So should be a great dialogue. There's been great dialogue to date for active meetings back in the spring. And this summer, we've been developing out those plans. I know my name is just on the agenda. We also have Corey Pacheco here from our office who can provide a little insight into the housing bond bill if you would like. Alternatively, I haven't received really any questions or feedback. I will state, obviously the purpose of this subcommittee is to develop out 3 strategies. We've heard a lot of great strategies from the public. I concur Mr. Dewey's comments. Him and I have had a lot of great conversations in the past, and these really reflect that. I will state also, understandably, you guys are on a very mission-driven task here, develop out 3 strategies. So going through a full plan is maybe not necessary, but I do want to point to page 15 through 17 of the draft housing production plan, because 15 through 17 really gives a full menu of different strategies. You may not agree with all of them, but they really are put there for you to consider. Things like year-round deed restrictions, things like strengthening our inclusionary housing, things like explore the ability of developing out town-owned properties. These are all strategies right there in the draft plan that we could lift up and say, hey, we're not commenting on the plan itself, but we've identified a couple strategies here that are already in the thought process and could, maybe be moved forward a little bit quicker, to everyone's point here this evening. With that, Mr. Pacheco is happy to provide you an update on the housing bond bill, unless I'm taking away from your presentation, Laura. Okay. But also I'm just here to answer any questions if you like as well. It's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Laura?
Hi, Jim. You talked about the year-round deed restrictions. It's my understanding that without the state approving year-round deed restrictions, it can't happen. So it's not something that can happen tomorrow. And it's something that the Seasonal Communities Commission will be taking up. But that group has not been constituted yet. So again, I know how state government works, and it's usually at a snail's pace. There is momentum to get this done. The other way to do it is through land trusts, and I know the commission is looking at that. So I just wanted to caution that people keep throwing out the year-round deed restriction, that it's not something that can be done until the law gets changed to allow it.
Yeah, understood. And with the seasonal communities, as you know very well, Barnstable technically is not a seasonal community at this time, but my recommendation to the council will be to explore that, that designation, because it can open up some doors, such as potentially year-round deed restrictions. But Laura's absolutely correct. It's not a solution that we're going to be able to solve this week. And happy to answer your questions, or happy to do a presentation. Up to you, Mr. Aaron.
I just want to, since you mentioned it, what is the process to become a seasonal community?
So Senator Sear updated us Friday morning that there isn't guidelines established just yet for that. He's ambitious. I believe he said by the end of the year guidelines will be completed. So to Laura's point, if guidelines are completed by the end of the year, that would mean, we wouldn't even be able to get started on submitting that request. So we don't have that formal detail just yet.
Do you know what the definition of a seasonal community is?
So I believe in there is 35% seasonal. And so Barnstable is not that. We are in the high 20s, I believe. It's only been a few of the communities beyond us that are in that seasonal on the Cape. And the islands, I believe, are automatically designated.
Could I just add
Yeah.
to that? In the 180 pages law, there are 4 or 5 ways that someone that's not over 35%, a community that's not over 35%, can have these other standards that could make it them. But they haven't decided yet. I think what they would like to do is have the commission or the state HLC invite communities to apply, but you wouldn't automatically get in. You'd have to apply. That seems to be the way it may work. Again, they haven't set it up yet, so.
So we'd be happy to see your staff talk about the housing bond bill. I mean, Laura can pitch in too, so we can do it together.
You want to pull it up, Corey? So yeah, Corey Pacheco, our senior planner, can present. And yes, please, Laura, I know you're well versed at this, so chime in with any additional comments.
I have to sign in. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Corey Pacheco. I'm Senior Planner with the Town of Barnstable. I'm here to share with you a brief overview of specific policy provisions outlined in the Affordable Homes Act, which went into law August 6, 2024. So today I will focus on 5 different policy initiatives outlined in the Act. Accessory dwelling units, the most popular, I think, policy initiative. And this is simply defined as a secondary living space found on a lot with a single-family home. And they are now allowed as of by right throughout the Commonwealth. I'll touch on the seasonal communities designation, which provides framework for communities with large fluctuations in housing demand and employment demand due to tourism. And second, merger of lots under common ownership, which you heard about a little bit before in public comment, which allows certain vacant lots owned under common ownership to be built upon for single-family housing purposes. Zoning appeals, which limits the type of appellant that can establish standing when challenging local zoning decisions, and veteran preference for affordable housing, which allows for communities to negotiate with developers when adding preference to developments for veterans with low to moderate income. And all of this is now law, except for the ADUs, which go into effect February 2nd. So a brief overview of the Affordable Homes Act. Up front is that it's a $5.16 billion authorization over the next 5 months. Next 5 years, excuse me. That'd be really quick. Over the next 5 years, along with nearly 50 policy initiatives to help stem the rising costs of housing due to high demand and limited production or limited supply. And it's broken into 3 different outlays: capital authorizations, which will help support public housing, existing housing production, and preservation programs. Tax credits like the Community Investment Tax Credit that will help increase housing production and development. And policy initiatives, which is our focus of the presentation today, which will reduce barriers to housing production and preservation, strengthen protections for tenants, provide new tools for local communities, and develop new housing policies for seniors and those with lowest incomes. So our first policy is accessory dwelling units, which are now allowed by right, which essentially means that permitting can happen without the need for a special permit variance or zoning amendment waiver or other discretionary zoning approvals, and are just subject to reasonable regulations, including but not limited site plan review, Title V, dimensional setbacks, restrictions on bulk and height. So the state ADU requirement will supersede any inconsistent local bylaws that are in place. It removes the ability of cities and towns to impose owner occupancy requirements on ADU. Yes?
Yeah, I hope it's okay to take a question.
Sure.
It just, isn't that our current, don't we have a restriction that you have to be the owner? I mean, I think this is a good thing, but will we immediately have that superseded?
I'll get into that in the next couple slides. I guess the differences between
Will you? Okay.
between
All
the
right.
town bylaw and the state requirements. But actually, the town bylaw doesn't state owner occupancy. It just states that an owner or it needs to be owned in common. The ADU and the principal dwelling need to be owned by the same person. Jim, you could I think that's essentially what it states, that there's not an owner occupancy requirement.
No, locally, we do have, you have to be in one of them.
Oh, okay.
But yes,
All right,
to
sorry.
Betty's
I
point, yeah, the state law overrides that. We are working on track changes to provide to legal to see which ones we were required to change. And we'll be bringing it to town council in the next few months for your consideration.
No, I just think this would be a positive thing, because I think it would be okay for second homeowners to be able to do this too. Why wouldn't they be able to do that? I mean, there are a lot of second homeowners that have to rent their homes to keep them. They've had them, for generations. And I think it would be only fair. I think it's a positive thing.
Agreed, yes, that will be a requirement of the town bylaw. Excuse me, I've been here for a little less than 6 months, so I'm still learning. So the state requirement also affirms the ability of municipalities to regulate or prohibit short-term rental of the ADUs. Municipalities cannot require, as I stated before, special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use or rental of the ADU that meets the maximum size or number defined in the Affordable Homes Act. It also clarifies the square footage reference in the definition. So when you measure out for the ADU, it references gross floor area, or half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet. And municipalities cannot impose parking requirements in excess of one parking space. And no parking spaces may be required if the ADU is located not more than a half mile from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station.
And with that point too, we have a question into legal, really what commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, and bus station means, because one could argue we have most of those. So we're inquiring further about that.
So does this mean that if someone wants to buy a single-family house, they can just buy it and make it into a duplex, as the traditional duplex? They don't have to live there, so.
Not
So no,
How I
no,
understand it,
not
no.
necessarily.
Well, it doesn't have to live there. What's the difference,
So the difference would be a duplex doesn't have the same dimensional requirements and
Yeah.
other standards that are outlined here. So your typical definition of a duplex wouldn't apply, but you're right, in terms of practical aspects, there will be essentially 2 dwelling units on the site.
Well, it does occur to me that the present ADUs that are owner occupied on one side isn't, as was said earlier in this meeting by one of our speakers, there aren't a lot of them that have been done that way. But if you make it that investors can buy any single-family house and make it into a duplex, any in quotes, according to, it does mean that there may be some real interest in this, whether people like it or not, whether you and I like it or not, doesn't matter. It's going to result in a significant expansion, which is the goal of the legislation, of how many duplexes there are in a given area. Just commenting on that, I want to be sure that I'm understanding, that's all, what is conceptually being thought.
Yeah, you're absolutely right from a practical standpoint. My hat on, I looked at dwelling unit and a duplex, and no, it's not a duplex. But
Yeah.
from a practical aspect, absolutely, it's 2 dwellings on a site there that technically wouldn't need a property owner to be there on site.
I mean, that sort of had to be part of the discussion in the legislature, given that ADUs haven't been that popular, in part because the owner of the one side of the house doesn't necessarily have the ability to afford to create that whole thing, to deal with the septic issue and all of the complications that exist from that. And there hasn't been a source of free funds or anything like that to do that. And I think people like me knew that from the beginning that it was going to be limited because of that. But now, because the problem that we have is just getting much worse, that this then loosens it up substantially. Just something that I wanted to mention so people realize the implications of this. Thank you.
No problem. So the next 2 slides will compare and contrast the Barnstable ADU requirements and state ADU requirements. I guess In the interest of time, I could just touch on the ones that are highlighted in red that would actually would affect our ADU bylaw. But I can go through all the points of both slides if you're interested. We could just go. Number of ADUs allowed per lot. So Barnstable ADU requirement is 1 ADU, but you're definitely restricted by septic sewer capacity and a number of bedrooms, which that will determine feasibility. The state ADU requirement is 1 per lot, but the language does state a special permit could be required for more than 1 ADU if you're requesting that. But then again, you're restricted by septic and sewer capacity. The next, yes.
So what if you're not in an area where there's sewer? Wouldn't that make it easier?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That with septic, you're kind of restricted by the number of bedrooms in your house, and then the number of bedrooms you're going to have in your ADU. So, yeah. So with sewer, I believe that you have a little more leeway or flexibility with the bedroom requirement.
Yeah, there's no limitations with connecting to sewer other than dimensional requirements.
Right.
That's a big problem to me, that there's no limit. So let's throw that out there. We'll come back to it.
Sure. Another point of Barnstable's ADUs is primary residence and the ADU entrance requirement. So Barnstable, if you have a separate entrance from the primary entrance, the secondary entrance for the ADU has to be less visible. The state ADU requirement doesn't really specify that. It just says you have to maintain a separate entrance either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling sufficient to meet the requirements of state building code for safe egress. In number of bedrooms and occupants, Barnstable's ADU requirement states 2 bedrooms, 2 occupants. Special permit needed for more bedrooms or occupants. People under 18 are not applicable. State ADU requirement does not state that part in the Act. ADU size requirement, this is another change Barnstable will have to do. The state's definition is based on gross floor area, which is essentially your measurements from your exterior walls, and Barnstable's is habitable floor area, which is basically your conditioned floor space or a finished space. So Barnstable will have to change that language to say gross floor area, which will be half the habitable or half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet.
Where the Barnstable requirement is more generous than the state's, is there any provision that we can keep something? I mean, it wouldn't seem like the state would want to go backwards if a town has been more aggressive in allowing square footage.
Yeah, I think if the town ADU bylaw is more restrictive, it definitely will have to change to what the state standard is. But yeah, I mean, Barnstable's has been more, more giving in terms of square footage. But it will have to change to gross floor area in our definition.
So what if somebody already have that amount of space? Would they have to do something to restrict that space, or would that still be allowed since it's already been in place?
An already permitted
Yes.
ADU? I don't think that we'd go back and start changing everybody's square footage. I don't believe that would be the case, but that would be something maybe Jim could comment.
No, your development rights would have already been what they call grandfathered, and so no, you'd be fine.
Okay, so Barnstable zoning requirements, essentially you have to meet, comply with setbacks and height requirements for the zoning district in which the ADU is located in. And the state ADU requirements stipulate use of land or structures for such accessory may be subject to reasonable regulations concerning dimensional setbacks in the bulk and height of structures. So it's not as specific as what, but you could read it as essentially you'd have to adhere to the zoning requirements of the district it is in. But parking requirements. So Barnstable's doesn't have a number requirement for parking spaces. It just states parking for the ADU shall be on site. The state standard is essentially imposing parking requirement of 1 per ADU, except parking may not be required for if the ADU is within a half mile of a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station. Rental requirements, Barnstable, it cannot be rented for shorter than 12 months, prohibits vacation, short-term rentals, either the principal dwelling or the ADU, but not both, may be rented at any given time. And the state ADU requirement states may be subject to restrictions or prohibitions on short-term rental. So pretty much in line with Barnstable in terms of restricting short-term rental. Ownership, owner-occupied, this is the big one. ADU must be kept in common under ownership with principal dwelling and lot. And one must be occupied by owner. The state standard states that use of land or structures or for an accessory dwelling shall not require owner occupancy or for either the accessory dwelling unit or the principal dwelling unit. So the next policy initiative is the seasonal communities designation. Essentially, seasonal community is characterized by a fluctuation in employment and population based on seasonally based tourism. Criteria still to be established by the Seasonal Communities Coordinating Council, which will be comprised of 7 members, 1 from each regional planning agency. This will affect the Cape Cod and the islands in the Berkshires. This designation goes to towns in those parts of the Commonwealth. And this applies to towns with at least 35% of seasonal local housing. And Barnstable is, I've heard a few numbers, 23, 28, but I'm sticking with the 28. This will give access to those towns that get the designation a $50 million bond bill for affordable housing, funds for public employee housing, and allows towns to increase residential property exemption for up to, I think Julian said 35%? Or is it?
It's currently 35. It can go up to 50.
Oh, okay, all right. So that's the cap. And if you're a seasonal community, you can acquire year-round housing occupancy restrictions, preventing lots from being used as seasonal homes or for short-term rentals, and can acquire and develop housing for essential public employees. If you become a seasonal community, you can build smaller housing or tiny homes up to 400 square feet, and they can be built on undersized lots. And a community can accept or reject the designation.
On the tiny homes,
Yep.
your seasonal community is required to allow tiny homes. It's not an option.
Okay, yes, definitely. So,
Can I ask a question, those tiny homes, why is that, Laura? This has been a conundrum for years for me, why we can't, our first speaker talked about, dividing up the lots and things. What is the problem with tiny homes? Do you see any way through that Barnstable could look at that?
Well, seasonal homes, like I said, would have to be allowed if the town decided to be a seasonal community. The reason why it hasn't been is usually first of all that they can't be transported, so they can't be on wheels, which is one designation. They have to be permanent. They have to be connected to a wastewater facility, either septic or a sewer. And then there's some Massachusetts what's sanitation code that it usually comes in conflict with for tiny homes. So that's it more than anything else, although they're doing it in Worcester, just finished a tiny home development for formerly homeless, like Detroit's done and some other communities have done. But I think they made it just a little bit, a little bit bigger than what the sanitary code says. So it's trying to navigate all the different building codes and sanitation codes to make it work.
Well, if Worcester did it, and they're not seasonal, why can't we follow what Worcester did?
Well, I think first they're on sewer, so it would have to be on sewer in the way they did it. And somehow they met all the regulations that there had to be. So there are ways to do it. They just have been, I guess there hasn't been a big push for it, honestly, here.
Yeah, and I would say outside of downtown Hyannis, your zoning is at least an acre, if not 2 acres. So you're welcome to build a tiny home, but you got a big backyard. So it would be very specific zoning changes that would need to be necessary.
Which I think would be fine. I mean, I would love to pursue this. I mean, I know it's been talked about for years. It would be something I think that could be done immediately and address some of our neediest folks. I've seen these, what you talked about, around the country, and they seem to have worked very well with these communities and, some communal living, which helps too.
I am in agreement with you, my dear. That is something that we should pursue.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, you've got more.
I'll try to be a bit quicker. So, as mentioned before, merger of lots in common ownership. It's something I'd not heard much about in my planning career, but their doctrine merger essentially allows for the merging of 2 lots in common ownership to reduce zoning nonconformities. So obviously, as you heard earlier, it took a lot of lots out of a lot of the stream for buildability. So essentially, with the merging, it reduced the nonconformity. So with this new act, it will essentially unmerges the lots. So as long as the lot conform to then existing zoning requirements of area frontage, width, yard, depth, and is around 10,000 square feet and have 75 lineal feet of frontage, that lot, it could potentially be built upon. As you heard earlier, that buildable lot you could have a house that's 1,850 square feet and cannot be utilized for a seasonal home or short-term rental. Sorry, that could have been said a lot better. So the next provision is particularized injury for standing. So this essentially limits the type of appellants who are eligible to establish standing to challenge local zoning determinations. This requirement, for demonstrating particularized injury establishes a higher standard for persons seeking to file lawsuits challenging zoning decisions. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but essentially a particularized injury it has to affect the individual filing the complaint in an individual way, which is either like a job loss or something concrete or material, and nothing that essentially impacts the community as a whole, but has to impact the person individually. And also the act allows for higher bond authorization. It empowers judges to require plaintiffs to post sureties or cash bonds of not more than $250,000 rather than the $50,000 when appealing a decision approving a special permit, variance, or site plan. It's intended to secure the payment of and to indemnify and reimburse damages, costs, and expenses incurred. And such an action can be imposed if the court finds that the harm to the defendant or to the public interest results from delays caused by the appeal outweighs the financial burden of the surety or cash bond on the plaintiffs. And the last policy initiative is veterans preference. This will, like mentioned before, allows municipalities in specific circumstances to negotiate with a housing developer or a residential development owner to include preference for affordable housing for low or moderate income veterans. The option's only available to municipalities that permit or adopt either an exclusionary zoning or incentive zoning, density bonus ordinance or bylaw, or a housing production plan submitted to EOHLC. The veteran preference can include up to 10% of the affordable units in a particular development. Importantly, the preference will not affect a municipality's ability to receive credit for affordable housing purposes, such as inclusion on the subsidized housing inventory. And that was my really brief overview of parts of the Act.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Rick, can I just
Yes.
add one thing? The bonds, although it says special permit and variance and site plan review, the $50,000 has also been approved for 40B appeals, so, which is helpful.
Right.
So just wanted to add that, thank you.
Thank you.
I will add too, so back to the merger item, we actually have got a number of individuals inquiring about that. It's not as straightforward as it might sound. It probably doesn't sound very straightforward. You have a lot of times people don't know that their lots were merged as zoning has increased. So, we started back in the day with 10,000 square foot lots to 25 to 40 to 2 acres in some instances. And as that zoning rises and you have, say, an acre lot with a house on it, and you own your neighboring lot that's 10,000 square feet, and that zoning now is 2 acres, they merge for zoning purposes. And a lot of people that owned it and have owned it historically have no clue that they've merged. But somehow the rest of the neighborhood knew it merged because they knew that wasn't buildable. So the homeowner now has an opportunity to come in and make this 10,000 square foot lot or greater buildable. We have seen a number of these. A lot of these, though, in our local saltwater estuary ordinance. So it's limited the ability to meet that standard of the 1850 and 3 bedrooms. So the minimum, so the thought, I think, makes sense. They're trying to build starter homes for families. So three bedrooms is a minimum, but we're kind of bumping up to it with the saltwater estuary ordinance. So we're trying to figure out how all this will interact. So, between planning and legal and building, we're working on it. But there is a number of individuals interested in this one.
Yeah, Jim, can I ask you, and it seemed our first speaker kind of piqued my interest too. How do you know this? You say people don't know. Can you tell people? Can we get an accounting of all of these that are in Barnstable and then advise people that they are sitting on such an animal?
So actually, the formal process that we go through is when a property comes forward and it's undersized, it's not meeting our current zoning, we actually ask for the applicant to go through and do a land use history of your property. And so that's going through the deeds of the property. You typically have to hire an attorney. They go through the registry of deeds and they say, in 1940, my client owned this, and they've owned it, in perpetuity that entire time. And it hasn't been in common ownership with this property here. Now, where we remove that whole, whether it was or was not in common ownership, now we just need them to go back and say, this parcel of land was created legally at the time. So whatever the zoning dimensional requirements were at that time, as long as it was legal, then it is legal today as long as it's 10,000 square feet or larger with some of those other dimensional requirements. So it's not as easy as us going back. We would have to have someone go through each parcel and do deed research of every single one of them. I would love to be able to just pop up a GIS layer and say, all these are available now, but unfortunately, no, it's not that easy.
Corey, thank you for the presentation. Is there somewhere I can print this out or download it onto my phone?
Oh, yeah, we can provide this file for you.
Thank you.
definitely, Or print it out for you guys if you want that.
I think print
Sure.
would be good because I would have loved one also.
Okay, great.
I think
Thank you.
most of us would.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next back to our question of needs, of who, of our need priorities.
We're doing
Oh.
Laura.
Oh, we're going to do, Laura, you're going to do more.
I'm next on the list. You can
You passed her by.
You want to do that?
Can I do it from here?
Oh, it isn't on mine. Yeah, I've got a different one.
Oh, this is the real one.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So with the discussions of using municipal land for affordable housing, I thought it would be helpful if we looked at some successful affordable housing projects that were, the beginning of this is initiated by municipal purchase of land, and I added some that were on already municipal land that the town did not purchase. I kept it to Cape Cod because the architecture and size is more in keeping with what we would see. So I'll just go through it. This picture in the background is Little Pond Place in Falmouth. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. So first one is Melpet Farm. The town of Dennis purchased the land with general funds for $800,000. Half of the 12, and at the time it had some rental housing on it, and it was mostly a horse farm. So half of the 12 acres was preserved as conservation agriculture, and the other half was given to the Housing Authority to develop as affordable housing. Housing Authority had a few issues, and so the town took it back and issued a request for proposals, which is the way to dispose of land, public land, to a developer. POA, which is the Preservation of Affordable Housing, which is a national nonprofit that does a lot of affordable housing on the Cape and is headquartered in Boston, and the Housing Assistance Corporation were awarded the project. The result was 27 units of near net zero affordable rental housing for families. At the time, CPA for Dennis contributed $470,000.
What is that near net zero? Can you explain that?
Near net zero means that it has solar panels, and they produce almost enough energy to take care of all the energy needs for the development. So this is a site plan. It's about on 6 acres. And I'll show you what the buildings look like. This is what the buildings look like now. So very energy efficient, nice design, central courtyard to enhance the sense of community. Next, Little Pond Place. Falmouth bought about 21.5 acres of land using both open space and community housing funds of CPA. 9.5 acres was preserved as open space that abuts Little Pond. The remaining 11.5 acres was designated for community housing. The project was delayed while the site sewer was brought to the site, and the whole road, it's on the back side of the old Falmouth Mall, which is now Walmart. Falmouth Housing Corp., which is a nonprofit in Falmouth,
and Affirmative Investments, which is a national developer, were awarded the project. Resulted in 39 affordable family rental apartments and 1 manager's apartment. CPA contributed $750,000. And here's the site plan. And this is what it looks like. Yes.
Can I ask you, Laura, when you're saying these entities are contributing, does that imply that somebody else is contributing too? That the price was actually larger, or was that the price tag for the?
Oh, no, the price tag.
It seems
I
awfully
should've
low. So where's the other money coming from?
Most of these have low-income housing tax credits in them. The first two, these two both do, both state and federal low-income housing tax credits. And then they have a slew of the state's what's called soft debt, which is capital money that comes in and is a zero-interest loan for 40 years. They don't have to make any payments, and then at 40 years, they have to pay it. And then there's, both of these projects also have county home money, about $250,000 each. This one, Little Pond Village, I think was about $12 million total. Debt typically is about 15% of the cost of the development, permanent debt that they pay. The rest of it comes in subsidies or tax credits. I did have the pro formas on here, and I took them out because I didn't think anyone would ask. Millstone Road, which is now called Spring Rock Village, I believe. Brewster bought a parcel of land with CPA funds that then opened up adjacent town-owned land, which I can't see what the things over the... Anyway, of about 16 acres, about 8 acres was used for the development. The select board gave control of the land to the trust to issue a request for proposals for maximum of 90 bedrooms. For those of you who know, 90 bedrooms is the maximum you can have under a non-wastewater treatment plant under Title V. So once you go to 91 bedrooms, you got to have a $2 million wastewater treatment plant. The trust, working with MHP, did site due diligence, engaged a consultant for community engagement, and put out an RFP. The project was awarded to POA and HAC, and the project is now under construction for 45 community rental housing units. This is the original site plan. The little buildings that are going around were mostly 2 and 3 unit buildings, I think 2 unit buildings. 3 of them got compressed into 1, so there's now 3 medium-sized buildings instead of 9 little ones because the cost was too much. The cost had gone up so much to build the smaller buildings. These 2 are actually what the town initiated. The town, in conjunction with the Lombard Trust, which is a trust that the town controls, issued a request for proposals for 2 parcels of land, one a portion of the Lombard Farm in West Barnstable, and the other a parcel of town-owned land in West Barnstable behind the YMCA. Lombard Farms Apartments is 12 senior apartments. That design was fashioned after the town farm that was there. That was the Arms Farm for poor people. It burnt down in the 70s. And Kimber Woods has 28 affordable rental family homes in quad buildings. CPA contributed $350 to that one. And this is what they look like. The top 2 are Kimber Woods, and the bottom one is Lombard Farms. And lastly, Stagecoach Road, Barnstable Housing Authority was gifted land in Sunderville by the town in the early in the late 80s. The Housing Authority investigated developing the site, but there was both critical habitat and wetlands, and they also had a parcel of land that was on the other side of those wetlands, and so they bought the middle piece. It was for sale, and they bought the middle piece that gave them enough land, 7 acres, to preserve for conservation, enough land to develop 12 apartments. They're rental family homes in quad buildings, and CPA gave $350,000, and this is what they look like. They're in Centerville. So just wanted to show you what can be done and has been done in the town in the past. So thanks for your attention. Oh, there was one more. There was LeClaire Village that just finished, sorry. Town of Mashpee made 13 acres of land available because of environmental and critical habitat that was needed for preservation. There was only 3.65 acres for development. They've built 39 affordable apartments, and they recently held an open house, and I believe the lottery is done. Yeah, so that's the last one, yes. Sorry.
Thank you. And again, is there some way we could get a copy of this?
Yes, yes.
Email it or print it out?
Yeah, I'll give it to Cindy. Cindy has it, and I'll have her send it to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious, Laura, who puts this entire package together that makes it all work? What entity is doing that? And because this is reminiscent, one of our commenters earlier had talked about using CPA funds at more modest levels, and these are all very modest, and then when leveraged with other funds. So, but who's putting the package together? Who figures out all those pieces?
The developer does, but initially, this is the work that I do for MHP, is that I work with communities and others on my team to do due diligence on the site to say how many units can fit on the site, and then what's financially feasible. The difference, the very modest CPA numbers reflect the construction costs of 5 years ago. These are all, and the additional costs right now are almost double what they were back then.
That's what I was going to ask. What's the most recent one that Barnstable has done of this type that you just presented?
Stagecoach Road, the one that has the 12 in Centerville, was the last one that we did. And I think that, I know
14
because
years?
it was 2012, because I had just got to MHP.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think what also is notable that these are all rental projects, and they're all affordable to 60% of the area median income. So where there is a desire to have a project that might have a mixture of home ownership and rental, or a mixture of incomes, that looks a little different. And it's, I think, a lot easier for a town when it's putting out an RFP to get developers to justify something that's affordable, because there's a definite public benefit that is being created here. Generally, the RFP, the town doesn't get anything back, maybe $1 or something, or there's a 100-year lease. So that's the thing that is interesting about some of the projects we might be contemplating at either the school location or some other, do we want to require that level of affordability? Do we want it to just be rental? Do we want to look at something that looks a little different? And then the financing mechanisms get a lot more complicated. These are kind of, I don't want to call boiler, they're very kind of a standard pro forma that goes into this. And, they all look different at the end, but there's certain components that make these projects ultimately successful. And it gets a little harder when they get more complicated.
It happens that most of the projects that Laura talked about were projects that I was involved with, and then my agency's involved with after I retired. But And so what we had done, to answer your question, is decided that what we needed to do, and HAC is still doing this, is to locate the possible sites to do things on, to work on the issue of getting them approved locally, but using a Boston organization to do all the technical stuff. In this case, is preservation of affordable housing. And because we didn't think that we could, one, be in Boston enough hours in the week to influence all the decisions that were going to be made in Boston, and two, that we weren't capable of hiring people who would be specialized enough to do this complicated stuff. The other thing is we have paid the town in some cases, you may not know. I don't think it was a good idea for the town, but nevertheless, negotiated, and this is not the current town manager, but we had a town manager at one time that would not let a property go for affordable housing if he didn't get a share. And it was a funny thing. It's one of my funny stories, which I'm not going to tell today. You know, you have a lot of them when you get to be my age. But so I think it's possible in the future for the town to demand something back from some of these properties. I don't like the idea if I was doing it, but if I'm representing the town now, I have to admit that's a possibility. You know, my agenda got confused because I think I had an earlier version of the same agenda. This one, it was slightly different, my own fault. But so that we don't have a lot of time left, so we've got. Let me take care of number 6 first. It doesn't matter if we go out of order. Last discussion we had on the issue of whether or not a person can rent a room in their house. And some people said, oh, yes, of course they can. Some people said, no, they can't. And some people like me said, I don't know. And so I looked it up. I talked to the building inspector. And in fact, I think you were given something, Chapter 170, that defines this. But the truth is, for the most part, most part, not every last time, that if you have a home, you can rent a room in that home to somebody else. And I don't know if I'm the only one that didn't fully realize that before, but it may be a source of additional housing for, in some instances, if we decide that we want to make this publicly known or not, or better publicly known or not. So for me, unless there's a discussion, that takes care of number 6. But does anybody have anything that they feel they want to say about that? Good. Identifying need priorities. The reason that I am concerned about this is because I think there is some pressure to develop housing for people who bring money to the Cape. That is, the real estate industry to some extent and the building industry to some extent wants to take advantage to some extent, and why shouldn't they, of our need for housing. And so are we, as an organization, as a committee here that's going to make a recommendation, do we feel that our job is to help people who fall into categories that relate to either people not having a place to live, serious problem, or people that maybe are firefighters, teachers, nurses, and people who provide essential services to the community? And how about senior citizens moving out of their housing so we can use the housing for something else and creating housing for them? You know, do we have agreement on any of this? Because we haven't really shared all of our feelings. And if we all agree, we could make it our priority. If we don't agree, then we have the usual issue that committees have. So, any comments?
I would say that my original intent in bringing forward this committee was that it really was to address the affordable component in our town, that was the piece that we needed to be a little bit more assertive about, because we have made some zoning changes or made some opportunities available that allows for market construction, and that the focus of our work would be much more honed to those who are going to be challenged to have housing here. Now, slicing and dicing that downwards, is that anybody 100% or 80%? I mean, there's a lot of traditional number or standards that people use to define affordability. I don't know if we can get that granular at this level. I think we'd be having a lot of conversations. But and then that's what's difficult when you start moving into the housing for our public servants or other, vital people who, healthcare workers. It gets a little bit more difficult because sometimes their compensation puts them over those area median incomes, or especially if they're part of a household that puts them over. So, and to date, I think unless we were a seasonal community, we'd have a harder time providing funding or incentives for households that are over those thresholds. One of the things that the towns farther out were arguing is that everybody was getting priced out and they needed some relief, and some of these programs needed to go up to 120% of AMI. So my own preference is to keep it at least 100 and below, if not lower than that, because I know even at 100%, some of the pricing seems outrageous.
Well, of course, we have, I thank you for your comments. I think that was good. We have 5 town councilors on this committee. So if you have, let's say, 2 town councilors here that don't agree with you, and I have had no way of knowing, then they're going to say that when this stuff comes to town council, and it likely will mean some of our discussions are meaningless. It'll go a different direction. It'll go in some direction we don't know. So that if we have universal agreement here on what you just said, then it solves that problem. But I have no idea whether we do have agreement on that. And we may not want to decide that tonight. We may want to decide it when we get closer to identifying the supposed 3 things we're going to tell the council.
I think the other thing to consider is one of the documents that we have used as a reference point for this committee is the housing production plan. Whether we recommend it gets approved as is, I think it's been recommended we look at the strategies that have been created. And the very purpose of a housing production plan is to really address the needs of those who are in the lower and moderate part of our town. Again, I don't know if that's a consensus position or if that's something we need to spend more time at. But I would say we would be spending a whole bunch of time if we're going to be trying to figure out housing needs for a plethora of incomes in this town.
Did you have your hand up?
I did. I agree with what Paula said, especially for rental housing. I think we may look at some of the programs that go up to 120% for home ownership, because I think you probably need that income in order to buy it. So I think my preference would be to focus on 100% and below. 100% rents are, as I said last time, the studio 1s and 2 bedrooms are what market is right now. 3 bedrooms, market is higher. But all that's getting built is 2 bedrooms and below. So, why would we subsidize market housing? If it can be built without subsidy, why would we, suggest that we subsidize it? I think subsidies are for those who can't afford market, and that's below 100% on the rental market. And it's certainly higher than 120, might be higher than 120%, but I think most of the programs say 120% for public subsidy is the maximum, and those are the most needy.
So one of the many reasons I'm concerned about this is a couple of our speakers before talked about home ownership, and so if we're including home ownership, it does challenge the 100% issue, as you just pointed out.
Yes, but the programs that are out there for homeownership subsidies for any, stop at 120%. So for homeownership, I think, I would be fine with going to the 120% that the program is, but for rental, I would cap it at 100.
So we're possibly going to do things that relate to homeownership as well as rental.
I would hope so. I think home ownership is the key in the way our society is built for people to move up, if you will, and build equity. But I don't know if you have restrictions on that home ownership, does that person have an incentive to improve their home or to do anything with their home if they can't sell it at a profit? So it becomes a mixed blessing. If we're doing subsidized home ownership, does it really achieve for that homeowner what a homeowner that just goes and buys attainable housing? I like the numbers we're using, the 100%, the 120, but I also like, kind of the buzzword the Cape Cod Commission is using is attainable. It would be nice to have attainable housing that doesn't have any subsidy attached to it, so people could build equity and that kind of thing. I don't think I want to always focus on this committee with having to subsidize.
Just to clarify something, these are rough dates, but in the 70s, there was a fair amount of first-time home buyer affordable homes that there wasn't a restriction on the resale. And then people discovered that they were going to all this trouble to get these affordable homes built, and then they were lost because they were sold at market price. Now, what we're hearing, and it's coming to some extent from the state level and some extent from local people who say exactly the same thing you said, that homeownership, is important for people's financial future in terms of retirement, in terms of college, in terms of those kinds of things. And so we shouldn't have that total restriction there now. And that's a tough question, because it means when we create homeownership, if we do it that way, it's not going to last. It's going to go away again, and we have to assume then that the world is going to be better in the future, so people can buy homes and we don't have to worry about it. This is just a temporary problem. But time seems to be telling us that not only is it not temporary, but it's getting worse for people trying to buy homes. My generation, and I won't go on forever, but I moved here and I had 3 kids. My wife didn't work. I earned $14,500 a year, and I bought a decent house for $28,800. Almost exactly, coincidentally, twice, when the rule was 2.5 times. Now, if I had the same job, I'd probably be making, $70,000 a year, and the house would be $500,000. So, I'd love it if this committee could solve this problem. But I think we need to take a position and understand what it means to us when we go ahead and pick out our 3 things. It's very important if they are 3 things. And I don't know if I'm talking too much, but I'm trying to give some perspective to this, of the good and bad aspects of it, because I don't have really a strong preference, because I know either way there's bad things about it.
I agree with you, what you're just saying, Councillor, about, owning a home and having that for your future generation, your children or grandchildren, is very important, and having an asset. And so I think the restriction on houses, we should come up with a better idea. If for example, after 10 years, that person will be able to own that house solely. Because I think what happens is that you live in a house, even though you know it's yours a part of the way, is that it's not 100% yours. And if there's a certain amount of, for example, repairs to be done, and to the cost of how things are now, and you have to spend $20,000, $30,000 or whatever it is in that house, you're looking at it going like, oh, it's not even mine, really. Not 100% house. So I think even though it has restriction, we should allow it to be like, for example, probably after 10 years, you can fully own it. Somewhere we have to be able to compensate somewhere that so people can feel like it is mine. Somewhere down the road, it be 100% mine. So I have to do the best I can to make sure I try to keep up with repairs, maintaining it. So that even if my generation will get it, they'll have something instead of, oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm only going to be able to live here for as long as I want. If I die after 20 years, it's gone to somebody else. I think that's one aspect that we really need to dig into.
No, I'd like that suggestion a lot, Hilda. I think that the time component there, and maybe that goes back to the concept of a starter home, that if you're in a starter home, the idea is maybe you're starting a family, and about 10 years is about right, where, you have older kids, maybe you're going to move up. And to create these starter homes that stay as starter homes, so they become naturally attainable. I mean, that's why I asked about the tiny houses. I mean, to me, like trailer parks don't have to be horrible. They can be very nice. That could be something that maintains an attainable status, that kind of thing, or these homes, that stay perpetually attainable. But if you stay after 10 years, then then it's yours, and you could upgrade it and get that equity out of it.
Yes.
I like that. I really do.
Just to clarify one thing, it used to be that you looked at homeownership as two things. One, it wasn't like a rental. In other words, you could stay there as long as you wanted. That was your home. That was where your life was. And then, because of some changes that have taken place in this country and in our culture, now it's seen as money in the bank in the future. And so there are those two things. It's a dilemma. It's a real dilemma. And I think that maybe it's too much for us to decide on this, but I'd love to have an agreement on it that is brought to the council for their discussion too, but I don't know if we can do that.
I wonder, Rick, if we don't have to overthink it, because I think some of the strategies that we might recommend are neutral to that conversation, and that if we want to create more attainable housing and we recognize that density in certain areas might create more attainable housing, or however you want to define it, like the tiny homes, you have a lot of them in a little area, that we're not restricting who gets to purchase those houses, but we're saying that, we're going to try to bring the cost down for that housing by giving some zoning relief. And so that can be value neutral on who the target audience is. Whereas we might have some other strategies that are very specific to, if we're going to have public use of, if we're going to transform public property into housing, then we might want to make sure that a portion of that serves a lower income part of our community. So I don't think we have to restrict ourselves completely in the strategies we present to the full council, because I think it is very hard. It's very hard to do that.
Do you think, this is just something that I became aware of today, actually, the difference between home ownership and renting. Do you think it's still value neutral with regard to those two things?
You mean in terms of community acceptance of the housing, or
in terms of what we suggest to the town council? Do we have one set of recommendations for home ownership and another for rental?
I think we can combine things. Yeah, I don't think I think it would be good for us to have some home ownership strategies and some rental strategies.
Yes.
I think
I would agree.
that's what we need.
Yeah, thank you, because
So-
I know nothing about this subject, and we have plenty of housing experts here, including Jim and Corey in the audience, and I just want to make sure that we're covering all
You know,
all
as-
bases, but not getting too overthinking.
Right. And as Rick pointed out, I mean, the world has shifted a little bit, and there are, younger generations may not even be as excited about homeownership because there's a lot of costs to maintaining a house. I mean, and some of the older people that we're talking about that are overhoused, there's one person in a 3-bedroom house, and the roof is leaking, and this, and yeah, do they really want to keep living there? Maybe. But are there other options to move to? Maybe that's a challenge. So that's not an easy answer either, because generally fair housing laws don't allow you to sort of streamline somebody from selling their house into a publicly subsidized rental unit. Maybe there's a way around it, but it's hard to guarantee somebody if you sell this house, we'll give you a rental unit. So
Three things. I have to leave at 5 because it's my anniversary today, and I've got a commitment at a restaurant I couldn't get any other time. That's at 5:45 in Mashpee, and so I don't want to be late. But so other than that, the question. So I don't think we'll have the time to do the best town plan ideas. But I have a question for Laura about this issue at the state level. What is the current thinking at the state level about the equity in housing and where it ends up?
So the Commonwealth Builders Program, which was designed for the city of Boston and gateway cities, was designed specifically to target, although you can't restrict, to target it to folks who have been disadvantaged either through discrimination or economic reasons. So that's why they chose Boston and the gateway cities, which Barnstable is one. And in that program, it has a 15-year deed restriction. So it has to go to whatever level up to 120% that it was sold at, to a household at the same income level when it's sold. And so in that case, that's like a traditional deed rider. And that deed restriction, you do get appreciation, but you get appreciation based on the increase in income, median income of the town. After 15 years, there's another 15 years that it's restricted, but in those cases, it can be sold at market, and the community, the town, and the seller split the equity above what the affordable price would be. They split so it's a shared equity, and after 30 years, there's no restriction. They can.
The town gets half the equity after 15 years.
After 15 years, the town gets half the equity.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think it's important, and you did bring it out, that there is an appreciation or inflation clause in this, so it's not as if you're having to sell your house at the price that you bought it at. There's, a recognition that over time, the housing prices have gone up. So you do, in a sense, earn some equity no matter what. It's just that you can't take advantage of these extreme changes in house prices that we've seen recently.
So we don't have Cynthia here to plan our next meeting. We could just decide when we want to do it, and I will tell her when we want to do it. Now, I'd like to get it to try to have us agree on, we have pretty good attendance tonight, only one person missing, so that's good. But, so, we're Monday today, we've done Fridays before, we're doing 3 to 5 the last couple of times. Do those two things work for people generally in the future, or is it one better than the other, and so forth and so on?
I like the Mondays 3 to 5.
I do too. And I think the public can, the more we hold at one time, the more
Okay, so
people
3 to
can
5, yeah.
expect it then.
I completely agree, of course. What about the date, or day or date, or week,
First or 28th?
21st or the 28th.
21st or 28th? So do you want to, what?
Sorry to be a party pooper. I just know communications is heavily booked. I could, maybe if you want to offer a few dates and have Cynthia look into those dates that work for everyone, I would hate for you guys to continue to a date certain and then that date not be available. If you wanted to offer a few, I'm happy to work with Cynthia as well.
21st and the 28th. We give those two and see what she says, or we can move towards something else.
And if neither, would November 4th, which is the very next Monday, be something?
What about, so you're going to do our work for us on this one?
Sure, yes.
That's I like that. I think we gotta keep meeting and get this, try to get this done. You know, so that, would anyone want to schedule something for all three of those dates if we can get them? You want two? So then we don't know which two. So, any two. That's.
Any two out of the three?
What? You're the only person that does, so you win. Any two of those three dates, we would like to reserve the 3 to 5 time.
21st, 28th, and then
November
November
4th.
4th.
And I think this time was fairly available.
I'm looking at the calendar right now. 21st has 2 meetings at 5, but one I know is remote at least, so we should be okay there. Though something else might pop up. 28th, I have planning board that evening, but that doesn't start till 7, so you should be fine there, hopefully. CFAC does meet at 6. But, yeah, so I'll work with Cynthia, and
November 4th.
2 out of those 3 dates, we'll target those.
Okay. So what does November 4th look like? You mentioned the first two, you didn't mention the third one.
That's why, the further you go out, the more available it is at the moment. Open Space Committee starts at 5:30 on the 4th, at least what's posted online so far.
The only
Okay,
thing
so-
I'd say about the 4th is it's the day before the election, and some people might be
Busy, yeah.
busy, so.
That's not a good time. Knocking on doors and
Yeah.
phone calls and stuff like that.
For whatever cause it's important to you.
So we're going to try to get the 21st and the 28th.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank everybody for,
We have to adjourn.
yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Okay, so,
I'll make a
All those in
motion to
favor?
adjourn.
Like to second it.
all
Like to
those in
second.
favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Yes. My wife was in favor, too.